hopefully some other people will join us. But if not, I've got tons of questions for Phil.
Okay.
And we've got two of our very special members of our special club. We've got Jacoby, who tell us where you are, Jacoby.
Right now I'm in Toledo, Ohio, but me and Magic here from Detroit originally, so that's where we're
Brilliant.
at the moment.
It's actually really special that we have Jacoby in the club because Jacoby is still in his 20s. And it's amazing that he's kind of part of and totally embraced and one of our most beloved members.
Oh, I appreciate you guys.
Oh, you really are.
They're one of my favorite bands of all time. Absolutely. That's why this is a surreal experience.
Yeah. And we've got Stephen, who is coming to us from Spain. Say hi, Stephen.
Awesome.
I'm the youngest member from Spain.
Yeah, don't let the
Whereabouts in Spain, Stephen?
In Jerez, which is right at the bottom where the sherry comes from.
Yes, I'm going to say.
And where flamenco comes from.
Ah.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
We originated here.
Cool.
So, Stephen, have you been a Mondays fan for a while?
Oh, yeah. For, God.
A long time.
How many years is it? 22, 20. 22. Where are we now?
We're in 2024. So it's probably, I would guess, like 34 years-ish.
Yeah.
Maybe
About 34.
That's scary,
now,
isn't it?
our guest of honor is the one and only legendary. You're looking more and more like Sean by the day.
Don't
tell him that.
It's Phil Saxe, who I think it's fair to say that without Phil Saxe, there probably would be no Happy Mondays as we know them at this point. I think, Phil, you are probably arguably the most important person who set the trajectory on its course.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but thank you very much for that.
Well, no, it's true. If you hadn't embraced them, then who knows what would happen? Maybe it would all fallen apart. Maybe you were the one that championed them. You were the one that you were the visionary. Very nice.
Well, no, I mean, to some extent, I suppose. I mean, I've said on the bonus episode, I was saying about how when they first started off in Manchester, not very many people were into it. You know, the Manchester scene at the time, as I said, because the factory was very grey coats, arty, I don't know, completely different than Salford and where the lads came from. So yeah, to some degree that's true. It was very new though, Manchester. You know, it was all about, great guitarist, great drummer, bit jazz influenced, whatever. Probably exemplified by groups like A Certain Ratio and Kalima and people like that who were related to the factory.
Wow.
The Mondays were something a bit different. And a lot of people didn't get them. I did.
Yeah. So what do you think it was about them? What did you see that nobody else saw?
Well, as I said before, I'm very interested in subcultures. And, you see subcultures. This is a bit academic, but we'll talk about. When I was a kid, I was a mod. Right, I came in the tail end of the mod thing. I'm 72, so I'm probably too young to have been a fully fledged mod. You'd have to be someone about 74, 75. But I loved all that fashion and style. And that was a national thing in the UK. Mods were everywhere. They were like the hippest kids in a particular area. And I loved all that. And because of that, I got involved in the music that was being played. I played at a club called the Twisted Wheel. I was a DJ there with a friend of mine, Brian Phillips. We were sort of the people who started playing rare American imports. And that developed into what became, I suppose it's not known outside of the UK, the Northern Soul scene. So that was a subculture that I was particularly interested in. I was involved at the beginning. I loved it. And a bit later on, when people like Bowie and the Velvets were taken off in the UK and Iggy Pop, and people were into that sort of stuff, I was one of the first people to get into that. And what I loved was the clothes and the you know, people acted differently. So, you know, there was, again, the subculture. And then eventually subcultures become the mainstream and they become too big and you lose interest and all the young people move to something else. You know, so I'm too old for punk. But when punk happened, a lot of people, maybe 10 years younger than me, got into that. And that was a subculture. And then it became mainstream. So that was the sort of background to it all. So here I am selling clothes in the mid-80s, and we started seeing different people coming in and buying different types of clothes. We've talked about the flares, but there were baggy jeans, etc. And these were things that were a culture just for Manchester. Up to that time, Liverpool had led the way, you know, with trainers and tight ice blue jeans, etc. And Manchester had never really done much culture-wise, certainly in the 60s and the 70s, not much. But then all of a sudden in the 80s, here we are, a truly, I suppose, Salford stroke Manchester culture develops. And these kids were dressing different than everybody else in the country, but they were going to clubs and dancing to what everybody else was. They needed their own groups. Now, they also liked things like New Order, Joy Division, Echo and the Bunnymen. All those sort of groups were there, but those big groups didn't look like the Mondays. And they didn't look like the kids from Salford. And the Mondays were the first ones who were those kids from Salford. So, yeah, that's really what attracted me to them.
So do you think it was like an anti-style? Like they were actively not looking like pop stars or rock stars? Was it just that they were absolutely as they were walking down the street, but fashion conscious?
I'm just trying to think. I mean, they're quite scruffy, but really, you know, quite a lot of people. There was a terrible term that was used by a lot of people who were into the Mondays. And they were calling the people who watched the Mondays and those kids Baldricks. Do you ever remember that?
No.
Baldrick was a character in Blackadder.
Oh, right, yeah.
Like Blackadder was this comedy program, and Baldrick was thick. Used to come up with "I've got a great idea" or whatever every week, and he was very scruffy. People were calling the kids from Salford Baldricks. Didn't last very long, but that's what they were doing.
Oh my goodness.
So, as I said before, you know, people would wear the same clothes quite a long, you know, all week. Paul, for instance, you know, would wear the same clothes going on tour. They wouldn't have, they had new underwear, but apart from that, everything else was the same stuff. So yeah, they were distinct, and people copied them. And you know, I told you in the bonus, you know, bands like the Electric Crayons became, you know, charlatans, etc., etc. You know, the Roses copied them. The House Martins adapted anoraks because of them. Yeah, they were very stylish.
So we've just got two new people joining. We just need to say hi to Patrick. Are you in? Tell us where you are. Tell us where you are, Patrick.
They're back down in Cross Hands, Angela, struggling with the Wi-Fi like last week or the week before, but
you're in Wales. Where are you? In Swansea.
Near enough.
And Nicole,
everyone all right?
Yeah.
Yes. Nice to see you. Sorry about all the issues. We had loads of technical issues this morning, so we're going to do the premiere of Clint's episode after this.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry about all that. I feel really bad because I didn't know how to communicate with everyone apart from putting in a thing in the community thing. Like I couldn't get in the chat because the video wouldn't load. So apologies to everybody, but at least
I thought it was me being a Luddite, but there we are.
No, it was
good to know. Good to know.
It was technology. It was technology. Poor Chico's had steam coming out of his ears all morning.
I can imagine.
Anyway, so we were just talking about what it was that Phil saw in them that maybe nobody else did. and it's a street swagger. It's an authenticity, maybe.
No, they were different, and they represented a completely new group of people coming from Salford and Manchester who dressed differently than everybody else, particularly Scousers. And yeah, it was something new and quite exciting.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's interesting that you've got a Clint Boone bonus show happening after this, because Clint was probably the first person who came to, he was the first person who came to a Mondays gig who I didn't know. So in other words, you know, people who came to some of the early gigs, I knew them all, right? Because they either worked for me, they were friends, or they were, you know, just people we knew. Clint was the first person who ever came to a gig who I didn't know. And I remember talking to him at the back of a small club. I think it was in either Bury or Rochdale. I suspect it was Rochdale. And we were saying, oh, good God, what are you doing here? And who are you? And I had a bit of a chat. And he said, oh, I'm Clint, blah, blah, blah. And he told me about a group he was getting involved in. And that was obviously the Carpets.
Yeah, amazing. Incredible, really. I mean, you don't know when these things are happening that they'll become part of history, do you?
No,
Like
you don't. No, you don't. That's quite true.
Yeah. Okay, so we have loads of questions from people who aren't here, but let's should we throw to Stephen, because you've got a question for Phil?
Okay.
Yeah, he's preempted me slightly. But I wanted to know about your music background, really. I know for Northern Soul.
Well, yeah, well, we say that, but I've got to be honest with you. By about 1971, I didn't want to hear any more Northern Soul music at all. And it wasn't actually called Northern Soul, even in 1971. It was actually a name given to it by a music writer called Dave Godin. And Dave Godin wrote for a magazine called Blues and Soul. And he also had a record shop in London. And he wanted to give a name to the soul music that was being played in clubs up north in the shop. So he called it Northern Soul to differentiate it from general soul. But I mean, I'd been going to this club, the Twisted Wheel, from the age of 15, and it closed when I was 19. So I'd been going for a long time, probably about 5 years. The last 2 years, I was DJing there at the all-nighters, which meant that I would start playing records at about 2 in the morning, finish at 7 in the morning, probably carry on DJing when it reopened again at 10 in the morning and finish at 4:30, 5 in the afternoon on the Sunday, with a little help from my friends, because it was a very amphetamine-fueled scene.
I was going to ask, how did everyone stay up all that amount of time?
Well, amphetamines, yeah, obviously. 90%, 99% of the people that went took pills. So that was great, and I enjoyed it. But when you get to about the age of 19, and you've been doing it for 4 years, and dancing your socks off, and you've been collecting records and stuff, you get bored of it. And also becoming a different sort of mainstream. There used to be like 2 or 3 clubs in Britain that played this music. By the time of 100 clubs, and you've got clubs like the Torch in Stoke, you've got the Wigan Casino coming out. Not really for me. Didn't like the fashions, didn't like the music they were playing. So by that time, I got into the Velvet Underground, Iggy Pop, David Bowie, Roxy music. I DJed for a very, very short period of time in Manchester at a club called Place Fate, which took over from the Twisted Wheel, and I was playing Bowie and the Velvets, etc. So I've been interested in different types of music. I'm just trying to think. After getting into all that sort of alternative rock that Bowie and the Velvets were doing, I was very interested in experimental music. You know, Philip Glass, Steve Reich, people like that.
Did you like the German experimental?
I wasn't really into things like a lot of those German bands, but that particularly American experimental music.
Right.
That's what I loved, and I love minimalism particularly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Terry Riley, In C, stuff like that.
Mm.
And through that, I got interested in probably one of my favourite acts of all time are the
Yeah.
Penguin Cappy Orchestra. You know them?
The who?
The Penguin Cappy Orchestra.
Oh, yes.
Right. You know, I love them, and I still love them.
All right.
So you get involved in different types of music, basically.
Yeah.
So I have evolved. I haven't stayed stuck in one thing.
Wow,
What,
that's
what
a
are you
massive
listening to
tapestry.
now?
What, to be honest with you, I'm now 72, and I don't listen to anything.
Don't you?
Oh.
No, I do go to some events. Yvonne's my wife, we
Mhm.
go to these what are called R&B nights. It's not R&B like Beyonce or whatever.
Right.
It's old-fashioned 50s and 60s rhythm and blues and garage
Mhm.
music and gospel music that's played in a few clubs in the UK, and we go to those. Not as frequently as we used to do. But you know, we're going to another one in May. We enjoy our nights out there.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, Patrick, you got your hand up.
Yeah, Phil, just a quick one. I mean, for myself, right, as a 13-year-old, but 1989 that was, I can remember hearing the opening bars of Step On in my coming out of my sister's bedroom. And that was the moment that the Mondays gripped me, and I thought, right, I need to know more about this band. Was there a moment like that for yourself, or did you know at any particular moment